Hello and welcome to the Nick Lugo Show. Today I had on Jonathan Pritchard, and I just finished my conversation with him, and he's just an absolutely incredible guy. I actually told him in the beginning of the podcast that even though he's been on 150 podcasts before, has consulted for Fortune 500 companies, and he is most importantly a mentalist, somebody who is able to essentially read minds, or maybe not, maybe you'll figure it out. But I told him in the beginning of the podcast that even though he's been on 150 podcasts, I am going to make this podcast as unique as possible. I'm going to ask him questions deeper and more meaningful than he has, heard in the past. He told me at the end, I did a good job. I actually think I did a good job. So we talked about very, very deep concepts, from just the basic principles of mentalism to the matrix to Buddhism to truth to Socrates to Jesus. We got all the way deep into it, and I learned from it, and I know that the more you dig into it, the more you're going to learn more about, yourself and how you could improve your life. So without further ado, we start off by talking about the movie The Matrix, and I hope you enjoy.
But yeah, the Matrix is a really good, the analogy of computers is a really good analogy to help people understand what I do. It is not really good for true understanding, but it's a good way in. And that's why sometimes I like tell people, most people who use computers all day, every day, don't even know about keyboard shortcuts. They'll click around and then they type, and that's how they interact with their computer. Then along comes somebody that can use keyboard shortcuts, and they can get so much more done so much faster. And people are like, wow, that's really impressive. Then comes along a coder who knows how to access the command line and create programs that didn't exist before and make that computer system do things that the non-keyboard shortcut person can't even dream about making it happen. That's what a mentalist is. Somebody that gets admin access to the root of your operating system and then makes it do things that you never thought it could do.
Wow.
That's what mentalism is.
Well, so I guess we just started the podcast because that's the perfect intro. So this is John Pritchard. Tell me about what you do. Freaking mentalist.
Well, I own a couple different businesses, all centered around leveraging the power of applied psychology, understanding what people think, why they think, what they do, and understanding the choices that they make that can help out in sales, marketing, negotiation skills, employee engagement, trade show lead generation, you name it. Anywhere there's a human being involved in the process, that's how I help my clients. So there's a lot of irons in a lot of different fires, but they're all powered by my just lifelong obsession with understanding people.
Yeah. And the best part about, just watching you, and, you could watch his shows online, but John or Jonathan?
I do prefer Jonathan. The one syllable, you're clearly talking to somebody else. If you want my attention, you got to use all the syllables. Oh, okay. They're really looking to talk to me.
Makes sense. So Jonathan is a mentalist, and you could watch his shows online. They're absolutely incredible. Tell us a little bit about the actual, what does mentalism do? How do you fool people? All that good stuff.
Mentalism is a flavor of magic show. Most people don't know how much they would love magicians and magic. They just know that their uncle did some stupid magic tricks. My uncle was stupid. I hate magic. So they have a negative perception of what magic can be. So I usually say, oh, no, it's completely different. But mentalism is a kind of a niche within the world of magic and mystery entertainment. So basically during the show, and it's a theater show, not a cult, is that I make it look like I can read minds. And it's all just applied psychology, showmanship, and moxie. Those are the three secret ingredients of what I do. So yeah, I used that to travel the world for a good 10 years, entertained folks all over the place of all walks of life. And what I do still works. So it doesn't matter what culture you grew up in. These processes are still in play. So that's kind of how I got started. And then thinking about, wow, how does all this stuff work is the rabbit hole that led me into doing the corporate consulting and speaking stuff.
Makes sense. So the problem is that unfortunately people don't learn, people don't understand the world. And I have, crafted a bunch of questions, and my goal. So the thing is, you could watch Jonathan Pritchard. You could watch him he's been in about 150 podcasts. He's highly successful doing all the things that he's doing. If you're watching this on YouTube, his setup is just absolutely incredible. But my goal for this podcast is to ask him questions that he's never received before, yell on topics that you've never talked about before, and hopefully, make this a unique podcast. You can look at the other 150 podcasts if you want to, just learn about the basics. So we're done with the basics. Now I want to get into actually what the real problem is. And I sort of painted it like this, and tell me sort of how you feel about it. The problem is that we live in essentially multiple different worlds, right? So your world is different from my world. And the reason why is because we don't see reality as it is. So sort of explain how that applies to mentalism and sort of, this deep rooted problem in essentially perception.
Yeah, you got it. Let me walk you through it. It's better to show you than talk about it, really. And do you have an iPhone or Android or anything close by?
Actually, unfortunately, I carry a flip phone, but
you've got a flip phone. That's amazing.
I'm a bit mad, but yeah.
Okay. So the flip phone, I had one a long time ago. So let me remember. Don't check yet. Don't check. But is there kind of like a home screen where there's the contacts phone, that kind of thing, like where there are icons on the home screen, right? So this might actually still work, right? So put your flip phone face down,
okay,
so that you're not tempted. And for anybody that's playing along at home, if you've got an iPhone or an Android instead of Nick's flip phone, this will be easier for you to follow along. Please don't follow along if you're driving. But the idea is that you see that home screen all the time. And like most addicts, you've looked at it 150, 200 times a day.
Worse.
Right? So you should know what icon is in the upper left-hand corner of your home screen. You should know, right? Because you've seen it today. We're kind of in the evening time. So you're in the upper 100 at least, right? Now, dudes aren't the greatest at this, so good luck with this. But the idea is to lock in your head what you think that top left corner icon is.
So I'm even worse because the flip phone actually only has 9 icons. You can't change the icons. They never move around. It's not like an iPhone where you could change it. I'm trying to think. I'm going to say my contacts. I think it's my contacts.
All right. So you're committing to contacts. So not yet, but in just a moment, on the count of 3, you're going to turn it over. You're going to flip it open. And is it locked? Do you have to unlock it?
No, it just opens.
So it just opens and then you can check and then close it. Right. Mm-hmm. So for the folks that are playing along, I'm going to walk them through the stages of lighting up your phone. Then you unlock it. Then you're looking at your home screen, right? So on the count of 3, I want you to check, then put it face down again, right? So go for it. 1, 2, 3, check. All right. Did you get it right or wrong?
Wrong.
Okay. So you got it wrong. That's the first failure. But if I remember correctly, there should be that top bar that's always been on cell phones that indicates your cell coverage level And also the time is in the corner there too.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see the time when you were looking?
No, I wasn't paying attention to that.
And anybody that was trying this out too, if it's an iPhone or an Android, when you light up your phone before you unlock it, you've got the time right there too. Even if you did unlock it, it's up in the corner there as well. So that information was available to you the whole time.
It was.
However, due to the nature of my request, it made you prioritize some information over others.
Yeah.
So you have limited attention and your conscious mind focused it on what was most valuable to you, because the value was in the upper left-hand corner of what that icon was. So your values dictate what you see.
And what you focus on.
And what you focus on dictates what you don't see. So here's the weird part about it. Early on, as you're kind of installing the personality and the operating system of you've had experiences that are logical for you to come to the conclusions that you have about how the world works.
Such as?
If I trust somebody, they're going to hurt me.
Okay.
Parents care for me. Parents mean love and safety.
Yeah, this is deep rooted, right? This is
super deep rooted. This is not, I like Wheaties.
Yeah.
This is fundamental beliefs about how the world works that are so deep that you're never consciously aware of them.
Yeah.
The weird thing, though, is that they're installed very young and they're running in the background the whole time. And as that stupid example of the cell phone and the icon shows, your values dictate what you're aware of. So if your fundamental values dictate that trust equals pain, then that's the only thing you're going to see, because your values mean that you're going to ignore anything that does not equal trust equals pain.
So anytime, let's say you get into a good relationship, that would just completely implode because you would believe that trust leads to more pain. Okay.
Exactly. And the weird thing is that you don't see that it's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like you didn't see the time, you would only see the icon. And the icon is the bad in this weird metaphor. Right.
Okay.
So the weirder part is that then it's reinforcing your fundamental beliefs that relationships are bad, or whatever that belief is, because you keep seeing it again and again and again. And you've got multiple examples of proof that I am correct about the way that I see the world.
Interesting.
But it's because your values dictate what you're aware of.
So it's self-fulfilling.
Exactly. And self-propagating and self-reinforcing.
Jeez. Okay.
So it's not that you and I are experiencing two different realities.
Mm-hmm.
It's that reality is an empirical thing that exists without us. And our pre-existing beliefs dictate the way that we're going to relate with it. And it dictates the experience that we could have from it. So that's why you and I could go through the exact same process, and both of us will be changed in different ways in alignment with our pre-existing beliefs about what life is.
Got it. So like, and you see this all the time with like political speeches and stuff like that. Like someone will say just the same neutral phrase, but then two people will take it completely differently.
Exactly.
Got it. So now I could see sort of how this kind of, I guess, falls into the problem of communication, right? Like miscommunication. And that's your specialty, right? Like teaching people how to communicate the human flaws. And I'm assuming there's a lot of, well, being able to put aside these barriers.
I think of it like every single person has their own language. And the more languages you can speak, the more people you can connect with. Mm-hmm. And that's also in a literal way. The more languages you can speak, the more people you can connect with. And the more adept you get at understanding more and more languages, the easier time you have. Most people, though, learn to speak my language. If you want to talk to me, you're going to learn my language.
Yeah.
That is a low resolution understanding of reality way of navigating things, right? It's kind of like, oh, you think you're so valuable that 4 point whatever billion people on planet Earth should take time out of their day to learn you. Okay, sure. Well, okay. Well, actually, that might be worth it for folks like us to learn to connect with as many people as possible, as quickly as possible.
Okay. It makes sense.
Yeah. Because the connections are the most valuable resource that you have, right? Your relationships, a relationship to yourself, to your resources, to your problems, to your opportunities, to your friends, your family, your social network. Everything is relationships. And the quality of your relationship is limited by your communication skills and skills of understanding. So the better you are at understanding yourself, that is the window into understanding other people.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the big, like when I say like we live in two different worlds, like the biggest problem in my opinion, and that's what it sort of seems like, is something like self-centeredness, right? Mm-hmm. Being able to sort of see the world just through your lens and you don't really care how other people see it. And, obviously this is a huge problem, right? So one solution, and, obviously we were talking about this before the podcast, but, there's this philosophy in Buddhism, and we're both pretty big Buddhist guys that sort of believe that this belief in I is kind of like the biggest problem in and of itself, like the fact that you have an I, because really what you're doing when you go and listen to somebody, right, and you really start to learn their language, is you're not really just sitting there and as yourself learning someone's language, you're sort of immersing yourself in them, right? Trying to put yourself in their shoes, trying to understand what they think. That's the whole purpose of mind reading. So do you think that's sort of what it is, or it's more of,
kind of, yeah, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
It could take a lifetime to unpack. There's two angles I want to take with it. First one, to the power of mind reading. And the second one, I'm going to blow your mind with the Buddhism stuff. So first one, the power of being a mind reader isn't that I can read minds. The real power is that on an instinctual level, everybody knows that they're going to die. They are the only ones who know that they're alive. Take that to its logical conclusion. That's kind of psychopath level, right? Like, I'm the only one that knows I'm real, so I can torture other people, and it's not bad because they're not really people. So we're not going that far. It's just that you are locked inside your own brain. You're locked inside your own experience, and you can't ever really know that there's another person out there. So we kind of go our whole lives by ourselves. Even when we're surrounded by friends and family, we're still locked into our own experience. So that is profoundly lonely.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is kind of the deepest seated issue of being alive, that we're alive by ourselves the whole time.
So how does that relate to the fact that you can die? I missed that link.
Because you're going to die alone too. You're the only one that's going to die. I can't die for you. That guy dying doesn't help me with realizing that I'm going to die, that this whole ride is going to come to an end, and I will have gone through all of it by myself.
Okay. So that makes you feel like you're all alone, essentially.
From birth to death, we do it ourselves.
And that's the creation of I, because you're like, all right, I guess I'm me and I'm alone.
Right. I'm the only one that I know is me. I think, therefore I am.
Yeah.
And it's only me. Okay. Mentalism tells you what you're already thinking.
Okay.
And what that does is it reinforces that just maybe you can be seen, that there could be another person that witnesses you as you, that bridges that gap of a lifetime of loneliness, that there's no other way. Like the only way that he could do what he does is to know what I'm thinking. And if he can know what I'm thinking, I can be known.
Yeah.
I can be seen. I can die knowing that somebody saw me while I was alive. And that is such a rare experience. It is vanishingly rare.
Yeah. Okay.
That's why it's so powerful. So it's not that I'm special. It's not that I have superhero skills. People love what I do because of how it makes them feel.
So people have spent their whole entire lives not essentially being understood, like I live in a world that everyone else is also fighting for their own good. And there's too much overlap between our worlds. If I told you my ideologies and you told me your ideologies, we'd have some sort of difference. And because we have that sort of difference, we're essentially living two completely different lives, of course, right? Two completely different worlds. So you're saying that you're taking a step into their world.
Right. And then giving them, quote unquote, proof that they have been witnessed. And then that is stunning to them, because that happens never.
Yeah.
So then when a professional can just show up and be like, all right, guys, for the next 70 minutes, we're going to get to know each other in ways you've never thought possible. They're like, oh, that's nice. And then I start telling them about their childhood and they're like, holy crap. Like, what? That's why it's stunning what I do.
So what's the reaction to that? So, all right.
Stunned silence. People start crying. Like it is such a profoundly emotional experience. And it is for me too. Like being able to facilitate that kind of experience with people is that's a lot of power to be toying with. So if you're stepping into that kind of environment in the wrong headspace, you're going to spiral out real quick.
So there was this one story I heard a few years ago. It was one of the ladies I had on my podcast. She was a shaman, went down to like Peru and all that stuff. And as she was going on her journey, essentially, she brought her husband along with her. And this was just in the preceding phases. He never went down to Peru, but she's learning about all this stuff. And one day her husband just wakes up, like, not physically wakes up, but wakes up. And he says, holy crap, I was abused so bad when I was a child. I was abused to the point where my dad left me in the attic when I was 6 years old, all beaten up and bloody and bruised. And then my mom saw me the next morning, pulled me out, and then hid me from my sister so that my sister didn't ask questions, and locked me in there for a week until my bruises healed. And I used to go into the woods to be able to just get away from my family. And even on Christmas, my dad would get drunk and, break the toys that we had and use the plastic to sear into my skin and like all this crazy stuff. And he forgot about it for 20, 30 years, and then one day he wakes up and he goes, holy crap, this all happened to me. And I haven't thought about it for my entire life. He's a grown man. He's 40 years old. And it sent him off the edge, right? Like it all came back. And what happens is then you kind of become a little bit manic, you become a little bit psychic, and it just absolutely broke him. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot going there too. There's a article I read back in the 90s, I think, called Remembering Satan, where a whole community of people remembered satanic rituals and things. Eyewitness testimony is the least reliable but most believed form of evidence.
100%. Yeah.
And memory is a very malleable thing. and very, very weird, right? It is relatively simple and straightforward to help people remember things that never happened. So in my line of work, knowing that people remember a show that I've never done, they come up to me afterwards explaining how wonderful that thing that I didn't do was.
Wow.
Oh, when you did that thing with the stuff and the thing, well, that was incredible. That's like 10 minutes after the show's done. And they're already remembering it in a much different way than anything I could ever be possible of doing.
Wow. So
that's just 10 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if somebody has forgotten something for 20 years, I'm going to go on the record that it is entirely possible that that is an accurate memory. Mm-hmm. My level of doubt would be right up there too, because it's memory and eyewitness testimony, decades out of date, that could have been helped in any number of ways. But we could spend a lifetime talking about how people remember the wrong things. So you're saying it might not have actually happened? I believe that he believes it's real.
Of course.
I also believe that it might have happened. It's also a really good chance that it never did.
Interesting.
Because those hypno regression sessions. Mm-hmm. So we're going to remember if you were ever abused, and we're going to go back to that time that, okay, yeah, go into more. It's essentially the same as going under hypnosis to remember your alien abduction.
Yeah.
So walk me through when the light hit you. Oh, yes, I remember there was a light. Yes, it was like a big tractor beam. Yeah. Okay. And as it brought you up, it did bring me up. It did take, right?
Yeah. Interesting.
You can help people create memories that have zero chance of being real.
Yeah, no, actually. So
I'm not saying that it's not. I'm just saying that the Arthur C. Clarke, was it? Great claims require extraordinary proof, something along those lines, right?
Makes sense.
So believing your experiential truth over reality truth is how you get into that self-referential hall of mirrors eye that can help you spiral out.
Interesting. Yeah. So I actually just read a book on that. I just wanted to show The Invisible Gorilla. You ever read this? Daniel Simmons?
I was at a science conference the year that demonstration was created.
The monkey.
And I watched it happen in front of an audience of 1,200 people. And I myself didn't see the gorilla. So really I've experienced it firsthand. Yeah. And that's kind of the phone thing. And yeah, it's some wacky stuff, man.
Yeah, well, that's the thing that he talks about. Yeah, if you've ever seen The Monkey Business Illusion, if you haven't, then you must see it. He also talks about, yes, memory is just essentially it's a recreation of what actually happened. And when you sit there, you're just trying to recreate it. But the problem is that you only focus on a small part of it, AKA our phones, AKA you don't even see the top left part of your screen. And therefore you just sort of fill in the details on the background.
Exactly.
But I did want to get back to, you said you had a second point.
I did, which is on the Buddhist side. I take kind of a contentious angle to what most people understand Buddhism to be. Okay. Which is that there is no I. Mm-hmm. That's kind of canon. As most people understand, like Buddhism is a meditation on the non-existence of self. That there is no self.
Universal consciousness, yes.
The there is no self is kind of a weird way of concluding a peculiar process. It's via negativa, which is to say, I am not that, I am not this, I am not this other thing. I'm also not that, I'm not this other thing, I'm not that. That which sees cannot be seen. So if you can identify it, you know that it's not that which is identifying.
Say that again.
That which sees cannot be seen. So if you can identify something, that's not the something that's identifying the something.
Yeah.
Okay. Going through that long, drawn out, long ass way of saying, I'm not this, I'm not that. If there was no self, you could have done that in a single sentence and say, there is no self.
Yeah.
You go back, original texts, they're going through via negativa. The body's not the self. This is not the self. That's not the self. You're not this. You're also not that. You're not this. Like, what's left? And you're like, well, there you go.
Okay.
The self is that awareness, that spark, that soul that co-animates with your body to produce consciousness and awareness of the reality of being dreamt up in this universe. That's different than saying there is no self.
Okay.
Saying there is no self is like saying, oh yeah, there's a marionette show, but nobody's pulling the strings. The puppet's pulling the strings. There is no, right?
Yeah. So you're saying, like, essentially, although the sum of the parts don't equal the whole, right? Although the body isn't the self, the eyes aren't the self, there's still this little extra part that some people, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, that people call consciousness, right? Like whatever, yes, that spark, whatever this thing that makes us able to speak to each other and, engage and see the world. You're saying that consciousness is the self itself.
You, 1 minute before death, we could take your temperature. We could weigh you. We could hook you up to every machine known to man. And then you die. Your weight stays the same. You start cooling off, right? But there's no self thermometer. Like the empirical atoms are still there. The quantity of you is exactly the same, but the quality is different, much different.
Yeah, something changed.
So there's kind of an analogy that I like that is about like a radio. So an old boom box from the 80s. It can tune a signal. The signal is being broadcast throughout all of the space, but you need the boom box to receive the signal, and through its components, you can hear that signal.
Yeah.
So the broadcast, the sound is a function of the boombox with the signal. But the boombox does not own the signal. The signal is not contained within the boombox. You could take apart all the components and it wouldn't teach you the first thing about the signal.
Yeah.
But you'd be like, well, the broadcast isn't the speaker. It's not the batteries. It's not the plastic housing. It's not the intent. All of that is required to broadcast the signal. And that same signal, two different boom boxes, because this boom box was manufactured somewhere else. It's still the same signal, but it's going to come out differently.
Okay.
So that intelligence, that animation of life is the signal, and you are the co-substantial system that can tune in to that signal, and your life is the broadcast. The trap though is that a lot of meditation is a focusing on the experiential awareness self, the part of your attention that is limited, that has to manage limited resources.
Focus on the breath. Yeah.
That thing that is the experience of life that is limited to being alive. When you meditate, that's the part of you that you start identifying with, because you're thinking your thoughts and thinking about thinking and then trying not to think.
Mm-hmm.
And that self-reflexive hall of mirrors gets worse with that kind of meditation. And that's why a lot of people that start meditating start being more anxious, being more worried about death, because they're spending more time paying attention to the transient experiential self that is not the universal forever self.
Got it. So yeah, there's a big philosophy I'll give you two philosophies. So one philosophy is by what's Joseph Campbell, right? Joseph Campbell is essentially, I'm sure he created the hero's journey, like the big mythologist, like really studied, essentially the stories of Native Americans, all these past stories. And he came to the conclusion that what is he? And a great analogy that he used, which seems similar to the radio, but obviously has a different spin. And tell me if they're contradictory, but he sees himself as a car. He gets to drive the car, and his little sense of consciousness gets to go into the car and drive it around. But eventually the wheels start falling off and the paint starts ripping off, and you have all these problems that go with the car. And well, what ends up happening to the car, right? It just ends up breaking down. And well, maybe I missed the last part of the metaphor, the analogy, because at some point the car is just left there and gets reused for different parts, and or still remains as part of the world, but his he actually breaks apart. I
like that. I like that. The one thing that I like more about the radio example is the universal broadcastness of the signal, of how you can go anywhere and there's the signal. And the boombox moves through space, but the signal is all present.
Okay.
Which, in the driver analogy, the driver can only be in the car. Driving the car. And then when you step out of the car, you're still there. But to me, the universal awareness of the existence of the universe is everywhere all the time since beginning forever.
Okay.
And that's why anywhere you walk, anywhere you go, there you are. It's that your body is the radio receiver for the universal nature of being.
Got it.
You don't have to get in your car. No matter where your car goes, it's being driven.
Okay, got it. Yeah, so that's obviously a very contentious philosophy, so I'm very
try to wreck it. Try to wreck it. Good luck.
So one of the philosophy that you just came up with is essentially the main philosophy that comes out of like psychedelic studies. I've been spending a lot of time, because if you're going to understand consciousness, you really must either understand, there are two ways of looking at it: either the Buddhist monks that have been meditating for 40 years, or just people who trip once on psychedelics, and they end up having very similar experiences. And there's a book called, I'm in the middle of reading it right now, How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan, that I'm reading. Cool. That's absolutely incredible, and came out in 2018, New York Times bestseller. I think it was the number one selling book in 2018. But what he talks about is essentially, there's the people who have this experience, and they say there's this universal consciousness that sort of permeates and extends throughout all of it. And then the guy who's doing all the research for it, his name's Robert Carhart Harris. He wrote to essentially trying to justify his research and said all that, and trying to make money and all this stuff. He comes back and he says, I think that's all just BS. Like, I think that's just you have a feeling that there's a universal consciousness and that it pervades and it permeates and all of these things. But at the same time, it's just everything's a creation of your body and brain. Thoughts?
Yeah. It's just a creation of your body and brain is a materialistic view, which is that it's all puppets, no puppet master, that there is no animating principle, that puppets can dance on their own. Okay, sure. Show me. Show me where that can happen. Nowhere.
Mhm.
So it's a profound misunderstanding of the cause of nature, of reality. Like,
so basically the puppet without this universal thing, right? Or the puppet master, right? The puppet would just collapse.
right. This universal animating principle, if you want to put it that way, right?
Yeah.
Without it, where that spark. Yeah, that's like saying, well, one day we're going to have a thermometer for life and one life unit. Like, no, that's really the only two ways of seeing the world, either as nothing but forces at play,
Mhm.
or as physical atoms, discrete units of reality. And one reality unit, two reality units, three reality units. And the forces at play is basically there's one force that manifests in different ways that can then give rise to physical atoms in reality. But it's also the substrate for every force that can affect the universe.
Well, it's really interesting. Like you make a good point. It's like, can both of them be right, or does one have to be wrong?
If the materialists are right, it's only because the universal force has made it possible. They're accepting this logical regression down to fundamental particles.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next step is, well, it all goes to one grand unified theory.
Which is
right. So they're just arguing against their own conclusions. It's logically inconsistent. So to me, that's the power of metaphysics, is that you've got the physics of cause and effect of the material world. However, all the measurement of meaning, of quality, of experiential value, all those things that you can't measure are still an integral part of life. So the atomistic way of cutting up reality is ignoring the qualitative nature of everything as well.
Yeah, the subjective part of it.
It's subjective and objective too, right? Because consciousness is real.
Yeah.
Right. So if you take the atomistic way, you now have to discount all of quality and value, when nature is nothing but value systems. That's all it is.
Yeah.
So purporting to explain reality by cutting out half of it is a pretty poor model of navigating life, which is why I ignore anybody who subscribes to that way of thinking.
Well, so I'll support your point, because I think I agree with you. And there was a mathematician, I forget his name. I really should know his name, but he, is all into doing proofs and all that stuff. And he did a proof to prove that all proofs lie on an assumption that can never be proven. Right. Like, but beyond every mathematical proof, once all of it lies on sort of an assumption. It's basically the why game, why did you go on this podcast? Okay. Why did you want to do this? And after you ask about 7 whys, people will be like, I have no idea. You start asking about their fundamental drives and motivators and how they got here, all these questions. And it's the same thing that deals with explaining things and also mathematics and understanding, just numbers. And you're right, atoms. It's like all of it rests on these bedrock assumptions. And those bedrock assumptions are the things that you're missing out on and trying to forget. Well, you still need them. Yeah,
it was Gödel that you're thinking of.
Gödel, yes.
Incompleteness theorem or proof, but you can't prove that proof. And it was in response to the time in mathematics where the belief was that you could do without beliefs and express all everything in fundamental bedrock logical proofs, which that idea kind of goes back to the Pythagoreans and number theory. They were the first folks, because it's not just Pythagoras. Pythagoras was kind of the keeper of a lot of these secrets, not the creator of a lot of these secrets.
Okay.
That's kind of another whole rabbit hole. But it's sounds common sense to us now because we've had more than 2,000 years to get used to the idea. But the understanding of numbers being kind of clean and ironclad, 1 + 1 = 2, those kind of rules. And then the understanding that logic is mathematics of meaning, and that there could be a tie between those two, that you could then treat truth as an algebraic expression. If this, then that. If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. If all men, right? So that leap of intuition between mathematical truths and then logical truth being able to interact with each other is what in the 1800s, those mathematicians were playing with. And they were under the firm conviction that all reality could be treated as an algebraic expression in relationship to truth and knowledge and expression. And there was that book, I forget what that name of the book was, but they basically spent years mapping out all these proofs. And then Gödel comes along and uses one of those proofs from the book to prove that it isn't self-complete and that it could never be self-complete. And there goes all of your work. And that was a huge crack. But that huge crack in the infallibility of logic was what the Pythagoreans were all about. That was the secret. Like, they only had one secret, and it was that the world isn't fundamentally reducible to individual parts.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the things that, as I start to, that's a big Buddhist philosophy, like the Buddhist philosophy is that whenever you try to put Buddhism into philosophy, it loses its meaning, right? This was what Socrates said. Socrates said, the best part about me, the thing that makes me wise is the fact that I realize that I don't know. And, going back to the Buddhist example, it's like, yes, like once it turns into something that can be conjured up by the mind, it starts to lose its meaning and diffuse, and it loses that fundamental, we'll say, value that actually came from it. So, and then they'll say that this entire discussion is pointless, but at least we're getting closer to it, and that, that scares me.
Good. It means your head's on straight.
All right. At least,
and that understanding and wisdom is disubjectifying yourself and untangling yourself from identifying with parts of you that aren't you. It's not an easy process.
Yeah.
But that is what wisdom is.
There's one, actually, I guess I'll shift gears because this is just a great time to talk about it. So you deal a lot with overconfident people, like you'll be sitting there and you're saying, like, people have to disentangle, people have to shatter their own belief systems. You're dealing with these overconfident people. How difficult is it to actually, have this giant belief system? Oh yeah, I'm so awesome, and then you just go in and blow the whole thing up.
It's easy in a way, because what I do is I create a context for my audience to make logical assumptions that are later shown to not be true. And the people who are confident in their own discernment, in their own knowledge, in their own experience, are the easiest ones to lead astray. Because I know what I saw. You can't tell me otherwise. I know what I saw. I know what you saw because I spent 6 months architecting the experiences and framework for you to experience the wrong thing. So yeah, everything you believe right now is a direct result of what I created for you. Nuh-uh. Okay, sure. So that's why children, like 3 years old, don't understand mentalism. They don't have enough life experience. They don't have logical faculties,
or the predict.
Right. So they haven't had enough time to understand what should happen to appreciate what I do shouldn't happen.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that, wisdom is, if we're talking about wisdom is also humility. And that's one of the things that like I've noticed throughout my whole life. Like I swear I used to be so confident. Like I remember I was 16, 18 years old, and probably am the same now. I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to change the world. Like nobody's going to have any more psychological problems. Like I got this, like no worries. And I was going to help people, like just make change across the world, fix the kids in Africa. Like that was my thing. And then the world hit me, like I was so confident. And then reality just, oh God, I think it was Mike Tyson who said, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. And it's like, that's exactly what happened to me. And then you start to realize that, okay, maybe my overconfidence, even though I chose to be so overconfident, no matter how confident I chose myself to be, there was a difference between what I thought reality was and what reality was. And no matter what, that just means I'm going to get shattered even more.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, that really, really killed me. So I think the biggest result from what I sort of came up with. So we've been building on this the whole time, right? So the big problem is we don't see reality as it is. And the result is that we live in two different worlds, or what you call two different languages. And then the result, right? What is the big problem with this? And this was the conclusion I sort of came up with, given your work and all that, is that we are too ill-informed to diagnose and solve problems in the actual world. So I have a problem and something comes up and, well, I don't even know what's causing the problem, what's happening. You could go deeper into this. I'm sure you could explain it a lot better than I can.
Yeah, the simple explanation is you are the problem. You always are. You are your problem. The whole time, every single time. It's you.
So let's say, I say, okay, maybe I am the problem, but the reason why I haven't been working out is because, because I'm too busy. What do you say?
Yeah, you're right. That's what I would say. Unless you were paying me to be honest. Because Jesus got crucified for telling the truth. People who are very direct and truthful don't tend to live long. Socrates, who you were talking about, got murdered, right? It was legal. It was technically justified. However, it was a travesty.
Yeah.
So most people aren't interested in solving the problem because the problems are suiting their needs in some way or another.
Okay. So for example, well, that's a very simple example. I'm not going to the gym. I could say I'm too busy, right? And maybe I could actually convince myself that I'm too busy. But in reality, I am just a lazy, mother effer. That is the reason. And if I lie to myself, if I lie in your case with Jesus and Socrates, if I were to lie to other people, it actually allows me to achieve some sort of end goal.
I kind of go through a 3-phase process.
Okay.
And I usually feel people out by going, well, how important is it to you to go to the gym? And you're like, Not really, I guess. You kind of go, all right. The end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then, well, it's actually really important. Okay, so why don't you go to the gym? I'm really busy. And how important is it to you to be able to find the time? I guess not very. Okay, cool.
End of conversation.
End of conversation. Third step is, I wish I could go to the gym. No, why not? Well, I'm too busy. Well, how important is it to you to really figure this out? Like really important. Well, what have you tried already? I tried this, that, the other thing. Okay, well, sign up for coaching. I'll get you there.
Yeah.
If they're willing to invest, that means that they care.
Okay. I mean, it makes sense, right? It makes sense in terms of, all right, you know what? Like, I'm willing to put my skin in the game. I'm going to put myself on the line. This is going to be an actual step. I mean, right. I see this very often. A lot of people just like don't have their heart into it, and I guess there's nothing you can do about it.
Well, one of my buddies, Uncle Sickness, he and I talk That's Kung Fu all the time. Yeah, he's a Kung Fu dude. So that the Kung Fu world's very familial. Okay. My Kung Fu master, my father, basically, and then my Kung Fu brothers.
Okay.
So then the training partner of your teachers would be your Kung Fu uncle.
Makes sense.
Right. So Uncle Sickness, that's what he goes by. And he's put it pretty plainly too, saying that like paying for services like Kung Fu instruction isn't to pay the instructor. It is to demonstrate to yourself that you are invested. So without paying your instructor, you're stealing from yourself by virtue of not investing in your own progress.
And that's actually psychologically true.
And if you don't care enough to pay, well, then you don't care enough.
End of story.
Right.
Yeah. I guess. I mean, like it definitely is psychologically true, right? Like we have, it's called biofeedback, right? We from what we're doing, we could actually tell what's actually important. So like they did many studies on this. If a beautiful girl walks up to me and I feel myself sweating, right? And the study was, if you're on top of a waterfall, and you feel yourself sweating and you're like, oh my God, like, whoa, why am I so sweaty? You feel like you're attracted to her. But if the same conversation happens at the bottom of the waterfall, then you're just going to be like, nothing happened because I wasn't sweating. And, so I could see how that goes right back to, well, I paid some money, so therefore I care.
Right. And I also do want to make the distinction and explicit point, because so many people miss it, that money isn't the only way to exchange value. Of
course.
It always has to be an exchange of value for value. Dollars just happen to be one of the most common and the one that most people understand to be value, but you could also pay in time, in barter, in attention, in any manner of value. However, no exchange of value means stealing, even if you're not talking about dollars.
Okay, so essentially, if you walk into Kung Fu, and I know you're big into martial arts, you go into Kung Fu and you say, okay, I'm just going to do the free trials, and I'll just essentially do it for free for a year. There's no commitment there. You're essentially stealing. You're stealing services from someone else. You're stealing resources from someone else.
Right. I mean, a good school would kick you out after the first one. Like, first one's free, come back and pay for it if you want it. But, you could offer to run the books for the business. You could sweep, show up clean, organize. There's always some way to provide value.
Interesting.
But if you're not willing to do that, you're not willing to pay, you're not willing to do anything, you don't actually want to learn Kung Fu. You don't. And that's the great secret of Kung Fu too, which is I look at what you do. I don't care what you tell me. I don't care what you say, but your actions can only be in alignment with your fundamental values. So if I watch what you do, I'm a lot safer than if I only listen to what you say, because what you say isn't going to punch me in the face. Your fist is. So sure, tell me you're going to go to the gym. Tell me you're going to do whatever. I'm going to watch what you do. And that's how I judge you.
Interesting. I mean, of course it makes sense. Like, of course it makes sense.
And everybody listening thinks they understand it too. And they're going, yeah, this totally makes sense. And then you go believe what somebody says, and then you're surprised when they do something different.
Well, I ran into that problem a very long time ago. Like my friends, they're big into, I'm not sure if you're up with the trends. By the way, I told him that he looks like Charlie Puth, and he goes, "Who's Charlie Puth?"
No idea. If they were alive as recent as 1,000 years ago, I probably haven't heard of them.
Well, I'm talking about a recent trend. So it's juuling. Have you ever heard of juuling? Right.
The vaping thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
So huge thing with the youth now. My friends are all big into it. It's just essentially the modern day cigarettes. And my friends are onto Juul, and consistently they would come up to me and they'd be like, "Yo, dude, I am quitting. I'm doing it, man. Next week, I'm into it." And I am such a sucker because I believe them. Right? I was like, you know what, dude, that's awesome. Like, let's go. Like, it's so great to see that you're improving and all that stuff. And then all it takes is one text. Like, "Hey buddy, like, how's the quitting going?" "Oh yeah, I couldn't, there was this problem and blah, blah." And that's all it took.
Right. And that's why being a person who does what they say they're going to do is the easiest thing in the world to get ahead in life.
Well, it's so tough, So, I mean, and you said it before, man, like telling the truth has consequences. And what I've heard, and not what I've heard, what I've realized is that people don't want to hear the truth, which kills me. Like I say, "Hey, listen, buddy, you're gaining weight. I'm not saying that to you. You look great." But, I say that to somebody, and I'm like, they don't want to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that. I remember I was at a cocktail party, and I look at the freaking, I look at the ingredients label and I say, "This pina colada is 49 grams of sugar." And they're like, "Shut up, buzzkill," like, and I learned not to say that again. And I'm not going to say that again at parties. But then again, who am I hurting? Right? Like, I end up hurting people who are drinking the 49 grams of sugar.
They're hurting themselves. They're hurting themselves.
Yeah.
It's their choice. And it's not on you to accept responsibility for somebody else's decision.
Of course. And think about how easy it is. We talk about living in our own different worlds. It's like, imagine you're trying to distract yourself. You're, a little bit not really great with work, and you're not very disciplined, and you don't want to be reminded of how undisciplined you are. So what do? You get friends that are undisciplined. You get friends that reinforce your structure. And then you have a Twitter feed, and your Twitter feed reinforces your belief system. And then you have all of these things that exist around you. You have a bunch of yes men, and literally your entire world is constructed by you, for you. I'm not sure if you've ever seen WandaVision. That's a new Marvel thing, but that's exactly the concept. Mm-hmm. And that's the idea. You literally build a world that is going to reinforce your values, and it's going to pull you further away from the truth. It's like, yeah, good luck getting out of that one.
Right. Throughout all of history, there have been people that have been in love with wisdom and are dedicated to wisdom. They're very few. There aren't that many, but they're there. Yeah. And when you realize that that's what it is that you're searching for, then it's easier to identify who is and who isn't. And then your tribe just gets smaller, but much better quality.
Interesting. So, have you ever read Thus Spake Zarathustra?
Mm-mm,
I didn't
no.
say that wrong. It was Thus Spake Zarathustra. It was written by Nietzsche. And he essentially made this man, right? Zarathustra is Nietzsche. It's a big debate. But, Zarathustra goes into the mountains and lives for 10 years by himself, simply meditating and acquiring wisdom. It's beautiful. So he comes back and he meets an old man. He says, I'm going to share my wisdom with the world. So he comes back and he walks, through the forest and into the city. And along the way, he meets a man in the forest. And the man in the forest is very Henry David Thoreau like, just living in the woods alone. And he meets the man, and Zarathustra says, I am going to change the world. I'm going to spread my message to the world. And the guy in the woods says, trust me, buddy, I've tried, right? I've done the best I can. And I've ended up out here in these woods. And infallibly, he goes by, he spreads his truth, and essentially the gold that was in the woods just turns into ashes because there was nothing meaningful that the people could understand. He gets laughed at, and then he ends up deciding that he is going to, unfortunately, take his small group of people and just go with him. So yes, so this is the problem with essentially the individualists. The individualists say, if we get every single individual to, stop going on social media, if we really focus on the individual and say they're going to stop scrolling, and we get each individual to get off social media, and then we're going to handle this social media addiction problem that we have. It's like one slight problem with that. It's like 99% of people just aren't going to go with it. Andrew Huberman, he's a psychologist or neurologist at Stanford. He's like, I used to have that idea. I know the harms of it, but I've just realized it's just never going to work out, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Right. And wisdom is a really tough thing to get. People think it's kind of a passive, I'm going to meditate and then blank my mind out and then have wisdom. It takes ruthless concentration and application of intellect to work through the nature of reality. So it's not an easy thing to do. You're like, come on, everybody, it's easy. You're like, no. It's very difficult, uncomfortable, and it's rewarding in its own way. So it takes disconnecting your reward centers from external validation.
Which, come on. Like I actually just had someone on my podcast literally a few days ago. His name's Doug Knoll. He'll be up, and he emphasized that point, like to be able to have a core, to be able to really, and I thought I felt this like years ago. Like I thought I had this idea where like I truly didn't give a crap about what people thought about me. And then I just went into my unconscious living and went into my life patterns and then realized, years, months, whatever ago, that I really do care about what people think about me. And therefore they shape my actions. And therefore, I spend so much time trying to please other people that unfortunately my life is not being lived authentically. I'm being controlled by other people. And well, isn't that just an illusion, right? Isn't that just an illusion? The fact that we are just completely authentic and living completely by ourselves.
Right. And being controlled by other people, unless they're holding you down and chaining you, well, you're predicating your decisions based on somebody else's thoughts. Like, wow, didn't take much to control you then, did it? So that's abdicating your responsibility for the consequences of your actions. And I'm not a big advocate of not caring what anybody thinks. I actually care a lot about what some people think, the right people. Most people, 4.999 billion people, whatever that 9 repeating needs to be, there's like maybe 5 people that I genuinely care about what they think about me. Everybody else, who cares? Like you have zero impact on my life. Your opinion is less than worthless to me because I'm not even going to spend time saying it's worthless because I'm alive this time and I don't want to spend it with you. So, okay. I don't care what any of those people think about me, but the right people, that can help shape yourself, shape your actions in the right direction.
Well, it makes sense.
Being accountable to people you respect is kind of a awesome hack for life.
Well, it kind of makes sense, like, okay, I'm human. I'm infallible. I'm fallible, right? I will make mistakes and, I will fall off the path. And imagine my friend comes up to me and gives me the right advice. And I say, I truly don't care about what other people think about me. You shut up, like, you're right. Like it really, it's nice to have those people that you truly rely on. But then at the same time, I have a feeling, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, that you have a bit of a nomadic sense to you. Like you're very anti-internet. You're very big on privacy. You're very, sort of not into the whole technology thing, just based on the fact that you don't know who Charlie Puth is and the fact that you think that there's 4.9 billion people when it's really like 7 billion. So you're probably
I'm a couple hundred years out of date. Weirdly, I love technology.
Okay.
Because it is a phenomenal tool to free your creativity.
Makes sense.
I love social media. Most of my important relationships I maintain through social media.
Okay.
I am nomadic in that I've spent 20 years traveling the country and the world to make a living. Base layer reality is always super important. I'm introverted also, so I can be by myself for months and be fine. So I'm kind of like a social interaction camel in that way.
Yeah.
But I do love technology, and I'm a fan of human technology.
What do you mean?
How much time do we have? Because
let's give it 10 more minutes.
So the social media that most people think is the technology that's destroying the world.
Yeah.
Things like Facebook, like Twitter, which is where I hang out a lot. They're solving really tough technological challenges, which is, how do I know it's you? And that problem creeps up at a fundamental protocol level of this device is talking to this device. These servers are talking to each other. But TCP/IP protocol, they're near infinite. So that's what DDoS attacks can be, is that these machines can represent hundreds and thousands and millions of virtual entities that can ping this one server. How does that server know who those IP addresses are?
Okay.
That's a really tough problem that rises from the nature of the protocol itself that these two machines use to talk to each other.
Yeah. So I could fake being Jonathan Pritchard any day of the week.
Right. Because you just pop up and be like, I'm Jonathan.
Yeah.
And the IP address is a machine thing, but the program could show the human level as I'm Jonathan. It's a really tough problem to solve, right? It's a challenge. It's so challenging that few people are willing to do it or capable of solving that problem. It takes an entire corporation full of people to solve that problem of how do we authenticate users?
Yeah.
The main way of doing it is, you know what? We, the corporation, are going to build out an entire department of engineers to manage these servers and to identify non-existent bots and that kind of a thing. And then we'll have these centralized servers that'll be completely locked down and under our control. Then we'll let Jonathan and Nick access a single row in the database. Name Jonathan, age, blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
When I send you a message on Facebook, I'm not sending you a message. I'm writing information to Facebook's servers that Facebook allows me to do. And then it allows you to view that cell in that row of that database.
Okay.
It's not my information. It's not your information. We aren't talking to each other. We're both connecting as a client to the server that is managed and maintained and run by Facebook.
Okay, so that solves the problem, right?
That solves the problem, creates another problem. Deplatforming. You just spent 10 years building an audience on Facebook. You make the tech gods angry. They cut you off. You don't have access to any of that data. You don't have access to any of those relationships.
Yeah.
You're walled off, not your server, not your information, not your relationships.
So you could just get deleted.
Right. The only logical conclusion is for every individual to own and run their own server.
Yeah, which makes it, then you have no social media, unfortunately.
That challenge of creating a server that an individual could own, operate, and manage is not a small one.
Yeah.
That's a huge challenge, but it's being solved. And I've owned one for over 2 years now at the time of recording. And yeah.
You have your own server?
Yeah. It runs on a Raspberry Pi. Actually, the little red dot in the back is my server. And the Raspberry Pi to the right of it, kind of behind the Rubik's Cube there in the back far corner, is a bigger node to help facilitate other servers to find each other.
What the hell?
So I kind of own an internet service provider company that I started
2 years ago.
Started it about 6 months ago, but I've been on the network as an operator of my own server, and then been doing that for 2-ish years, and then helping other people get their own servers set up and manage them.
So what's the purpose of it? Just simply to maintain privacy, like as a...
It's to establish technology that helps individuals connect and maintain human relationships instead of serving a corporation's interests or a company's interests that are in direct opposition to the best interests of the users.
Interesting. So now your stuff cannot be deleted. Like your stuff is online, and
It's
that's
all peer to peer.
Yeah, right.
My server's talking to your server. No intermediary. Nobody to ask permission. Nobody to tell us no. I don't want some Yahoo dictating who I can and can't talk to.
So basically, like Gmail is a server. So I go and I send you an email in Gmail. That's something. So you essentially have your own website? You have your own app? Like
it's the whole, it's called the stack. All the stacks of protocols and layers. And so you've got TCP, IP, HTTP, then you've got the browser, then you've got the email protocols and SMTP and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
That's the stack. So the server that I own and run, and that you could own and run your own, is the address, is the name, is the protocol, it's the whole thing. Wow. So instead of having 20 different logins for 20 services, you own your own computer that can do 20 things, but it's you. So why do you need multiple logins?
Wow. That's crazy.
So yeah, it's kind of like if Gmail and Facebook and Twitter and any kind of blogging platform and WordPress all came under the same umbrella and you just logged in once and it's the same environment and you can do everything in there. That's so much simpler, right? That's easier. And it's an identity that you own, like an NFT. You own the token that enables you to run and manage the server. So you've got cryptographic proof that you are the owner, because without that token, you don't have access to the kingdom.
So for marketing purposes, how expensive is all this? Obviously you help people set it up. So is this just like, okay, you buy a few things and you set it up, or is it a very complicated, long process?
That's the challenge of making this so easy my mom could sign up. Right. That's the goal, is to make it so easy that mom could do it. There's a couple different ways of figuring that out. The two ways that I frame it is, think of it like, I call it an escape pod. Your server is an escape pod, so you can jettison from all this wackiness. Okay. So the internet's burning down, get in your escape pod, punch out. Okay, cool. If you've never flown an escape pod before, if you've never piloted it before, if you want a skilled pilot to manage the running of your escape pod and you just want to use it, okay, we can do that. It's kind of antithetical to the ethos of owning your own data, to have somebody manage it. But if you don't have the skills, then okay, cool. So you can be a passenger and have hosting managed for you. The difference is, at any time, you can wrench control back and take ownership of your server. And I don't own it. Like, I can't own it for you. No. So you always have access and control and ownership of all of your data and relationships. So if you wanted to transition from a passenger into being a pilot, then you're solely responsible for the care and feeding of your server. And now it's your problem. So you should have the skills to be able to do that.
Is it that much? How much work does it take? I mean, you manage your own server.
In a way, like, my degree is in painting. I'm not a computer science person.
Yeah.
And as you were very apt to believe, I'm essentially a Luddite who doesn't like technology, but I can do it. So I like to use myself as an example of, any idiot can figure it out.
Any said, magician can figure it out.
Mentalist, please. You graduate from magician to mentalist.
Exactly.
So it's not easy. It's relatively easy. And it's getting easier all the time. It's an open source project, and there's a lot of people working on it to make it even easier. So in terms of expense, for $10 a month, you could have somebody host it for you, and it just kind of runs on autopilot. And then you're just using it as a social media platform, as a blogging platform, manage your own community, have your own chats and notebooks and shared links and all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
So you can do that, or you can spend $150, $200 building a rig like one of those guys over there. And that's where it lives. So once you acquire it, it's running, and you don't have to farm it from anybody or rent it. So buying the server, which is it's a virtual server, which is even cooler than a physical thing, because it can live in all sorts of different environments. So it's a virtual thing that does real stuff. So I can, it's all just files. Technically speaking, it's all just files. So you could package up all those files, copy them over to a different Raspberry Pi, or you could even copy them to a virtual cloud server based in Hong Kong if you wanted to. Boot it up, and then through your browser, connect to that server. And since you have the crypto keys to access it, you can log into your server from any browser.
Wow.
So you can move your browser or your server into any Unix environment, and down the future, it could live in all sorts of other normal environments, but it's very flexible, very transitory. So yeah, you can own it outright, own the stack. Like, I own that hardware. I own the virtual server. I own the identity that is the server. I own my relationships. I own everything. I don't have to rent it from anybody.
Wow.
And that's my dream for everybody, is to be able to build a toolkit of fostering high quality connections. And so far in my life, this is the best toolkit I've ever found.
Really?
Better than Twitter, better than Facebook. And it's a filtering process too, because the only people I connect with on there are clever enough to figure it out. So there aren't a lot of idiots on there yet. So it's great.
Is this done through blockchain?
Blockchain is really good as a statement of fact, not of value. So blockchain is involved to the extent that the identities of the servers are limited. And that might be where the 4 billion is coming from. Yeah, there are 4.2 billion possible servers.
Oh, okay.
And each one is a crypto asset.
Mm-hmm.
So if you own that crypto asset, it is the programmatic keys to birth your virtual server that will only work with the person that owns the crypto asset. So the crypto dimension solves the identity problem because I know it's me because of math. I own this crypto asset. Therefore, you know that the message coming from my server is me, because there's functionally no way to break that encryption to spoof you as me.
Yeah, of course.
So if you see a message from my server, you know it came from my server.
Okay. It's really interesting.
It's fascinating. Like it's what I spend a lot of time on.
Wow, dude, I love it, man. So Jonathan Pritchard, thank you for coming on. I feel like I have so much here that we could talk about, and God, we could go on for another 3 hours, which means I might have to have you on again. But tell everybody what's going on in your life. Tell people, where they could find you and, everything.
Well, I always have a lot going on, which is exactly how much I want. I'm never busy. I'm always doing exactly what I want to do, which to me is the definition of success. If you want to learn more about all the psychology stuff and to check out my books and courses, the best place to go is jonathanpritchard.me. If Jonathan is hard to spell, and if Pritchard is hard to spell, then go to milliondollarmindreader.com, and then that will get you pointed in the right direction.
And I will link it below. Definitely.
Awesome. Yeah. And I've got a membership community where all my courses live, and I'm active on there all the time, basically all day, every day. And that is at elite.university, where help people take their most ambitious, wildest dreams and then transform them into reality. It's a powerful form of alchemy, right? So that's where all the training and courses are. And if you want to know what it's like being stuck in my mind for 14 hours a day, go find me on Twitter. I change my handle on there every once in a while. So whatever I give you now might be outdated. So just go to either my websites or whatever, and then all of them link back to my Twitter.
All right.
Or you can find me at minderfolden/antichamber. And if you can understand what in the world I just said, then you're cool. And welcome to the inner sanctum.
Oh my God. Yeah. Spending, 14 hours in the mind of Jonathan Pritchard. I have no idea what that would be like. I'll tell you that much.
Go to Twitter, scroll. You'll be like, oh, that's what it's like.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, man.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Nick Lugo Show. Always make sure to check out the sponsors in the description below, and to like, subscribe, and give 5 stars, and in whatever way you can, because, well, I hope to spread this podcast and these episodes with more people, and you could help me do that. I always love to end my podcast with one quote, and this quote is my favorite of all time. It's by Viktor Frankl in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. Ever more people today have the means to live, but no meaning to live for. Think about that quote, and, well, have a good day.